All right. Well, welcome everyone. I know this is a little bit different of a time for people, so um, I know a lot of you will be watching this on video, which is just as awesome. Um, I'm Molly, and I am with my brilliant co-host, Jen Laka.
Hello.
Yeah. Tonight we're going to talk about adrenal fatigue, one of my favorite topics over the last year. Just kidding. I do have a lot to share. Um, So let's get going. I think some people are still signing in, but we're just going to go over our intro so we can get started here. Moving to the second slide. Can you see that okay?
Yep, perfect.
Great. So I'm Molly. I am a certified life coach, and I help people bust through their blocks and get unstuck and release their stress so they feel amazing again. I use energy psychology techniques as well as life coaching and meditation. And my life changed as well as my business about a year and a half ago when I started having some major health stuff. And it ended up that I had adrenal fatigue and Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, and leaky gut. And basically, in healing that physical stuff, I learned that there was a lot of behavioral, emotional, and lifestyle things that had created that condition for me over the years. So now it's not only transformed me as a person, but it's changed how I serve others too. And so a lot of my clients are people who have these issues. And as I always say, it's like this going through this stuff. It's not necessarily what I would have chosen for myself, but I've learned so much from the process and grown so much and changed so much that from that perspective, I am grateful for having all of these different things happen in my body. And that's why I'm so passionate about sharing it, because it's not the easiest journey to go through. A lot of people don't know about all of this stuff. When I would try to talk to family and everything about it, it would be like, what? Like, it's not, it's not well known. And people think, they're used to, oh, take a, prescription and get better. And I'm like, yeah, that's not this type of situation. So that's a little bit about me, and I will turn it over to Jen.
Hey, everybody. And I just was loving what you were saying there, Molly, about, family members just being like, oh, why don't you just take some aspirin or take some kind of medication for that? Because that's how so many of us wind up here. And one of my mentors, Reed Davis, one of his favorite sayings is like, having a headache is not a result of an aspirin deficiency. So when our body is giving us signals, which we're going to kind of talk about tonight, um, our body gives us signals of pain or sickness or other types of signals that are letting us know that something's wrong. And so often we've gotten to a place where we're just denying that or not listening anymore. And so my story is a little bit similar to Molly's in that I had some health issue stuff too, which is how I wound up being a functional diagnostic health coach. So I was a personal trainer by trade and worked in the corporate wellness industry for quite some time. And I was starting to struggle with my own health issues, which led me down the road to become a functional diagnostic health coach. And it also changed my life drastically. Part of that program, I was required to run some adrenal testing and leaky gut testing, all the kinds of things that we're going to talk about tonight on myself, and was able to then connect the dots as to why my health was declining as a result of being in adrenal fatigue or adrenal dysfunction. A lot of things were popping up for me, like my allergies were getting worse. I was having ear infections that were debilitating. I had skin cancer at a really young age. And so similarly to Molly, I'm on a mission to also share this information with people because a lot of the functional health stuff is not talked about so much, but it's such a huge part of how we can balance our bodies. And so I use a lot of holistic and functional health approaches to help people take a deeper dive look at their health to actually find the missing pieces, like be able to connect the dots and figure out exactly what's going wrong with them, and also to fix it. Like, what's so, I think, amazing about this process and what we're going to talk about tonight is like a lot of this stuff is reversible. And for my own, as part of my own journey, I've been on this journey for a little over 3 years now, and I consider myself a recovered cortisol junkie or an adrenal fatigue survivor who also had a history of leaky gut, which was contributing to that. My hormones were out of balance. I was amenorrheic, or I had no menstrual period for well over 5 years. And now that I've balanced my hormones, it's finally come back this year, actually in 2016. Most of us on the line, females, would probably be excited to not have that period, but it's actually essential for our bodies. And so I want to empower others to understand their body better, understand their health better, and feel empowered that you guys can be requesting certain testing, or there's resources out there for you beyond maybe what your doctor is telling you, like finding a naturopath or somebody like me that can help you, and understanding your body and reconnecting in that kind of way so that you can rebuild your health and live your happiest life.
Great. Okay. So what we're going to go through tonight with you is, what is adrenal fatigue? What are the symptoms? What's the diagnostic process? How do adrenals affect gut and thyroid? This is like, I so wish I knew this when I started my journey. I started having a thyroid issue and was told some very inaccurate stuff in the process of healing that. So the relationship between gut, thyroid, and adrenal is, there's usually some stuff going on there. When you have one, you might have the other. I'm going to talk about what the root cause is, naturally heal, some mindset changes, dietary changes, and upcoming webinars that we have as well. So let's get to it. Turn it over to Jen.
Yeah, so adrenal fatigue is a funny thing. The definition of it is a little bit vague because it's actually in traditional, like mainstream or Western medicine, it's not recognized as a medical condition, even though doctors will recognize other adrenal conditions such as like Addison's disease, which is also can be considered an autoimmune disorder as well. But what we're talking about tonight, kind of like adrenal fatigue, or as I like to better call it, adrenal dysfunction, it's not typically recognized. But overall, what it is that it's fatigue or other symptoms that are caused by adrenal glands that are overworked. So people who are under a lot of mental, emotional, physical, biochemical type of stress in their body, the way that what our adrenal glands do for us is they produce cortisol as a stress response. So your adrenals glands sit on top of your kidneys, and they're associated with, a lot of you on the line might be familiar with a term like your fight or flight response. So anytime we encounter any kind of stress, our body releases cortisol. It also releases cortisol to help lower blood sugar, as well as like as a natural anti-inflammatory, amongst other things that we do. So in our society, the society that we live in now, there's a lot of different stressors that we have in our life. There's our email that's connected to our phone, like we're constantly checking it. There's social media. There's our actual work that we have to do. There's traffic on the way to work. And those are just some of the common things that we think about, our relationships and maybe some conflict or stress that we have there. But there's also stress that we can't see or hear or feel necessarily, such as chemicals that you come in encounter with in your environment, the types of foods that you're putting in your body that aren't agreeing with you. That all creates an internal stress or internal chaos, which then your body releases cortisol as a result of that. So to say that the adrenals are fatigued may not be so accurate, because our adrenals are actually working for us all of the time. We're just overloading them and requiring a high demand of cortisol, which can then create more so what's better defined as adrenal dysfunction, or the HPA axis dysfunction. And the HPA axis we'll talk about in a little bit too, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It all work together. We could also call it hyper or hypocortisolism, just like we do with thyroid, like hyper or hypothyroidism. So our adrenals are actually working all of the time. It's just that we're overloading them with so much stress. And when we do that, they get a little bit out of imbalance. Our cortisol rhythm goes crazy askew, and then that results in a cascade or a domino effect in our other hormones or other systems of the body, which is then where we can start seeing all kinds of symptoms. So the classic symptoms that I see often with my clients, as well as kind of like known on the internet, as well, if you were to Google this, that are associated with adrenal dysfunction, is feeling exhausted even after you sleep. So you get like a full night worth of sleep, like 8 hours. I just was talking to a guy yesterday who said he got 9 hours of sleep and he still feels exhausted, like his energy is super low. Or inversely of that, you might feel wired but tired. And that's kind of the cortisol high. That's what I is associated with a cortisol junkie, where you're putting out so much cortisol all the time. It's like you're running on adrenaline all the time. So you feel wired, but at the same time, you feel exhausted. Um, any type of weight gain around your midsection. I mean, there's a ton of studies that show that cortisol is directly related to any kind of weight gain around your midsection in the stomach area. I don't know if you guys follow or remember, like there was a trend of taking like a medication that was supposed to reduce cortisol, or over the counter like dietary supplement that was supposed to reduce cortisol and get rid of belly fat a long time ago, but that's because that's associated with it. Also, a low sex drive or irregular menstrual cycles. This is a big one because your cortisol, when it is out of balance and it's either high or low or bouncing all over the place because of stress, your body literally starts stealing other hormones in order to keep up with the demand of cortisol. So when that happens, we'll see usually dips in estrogen and testosterone levels. And so that can result in the low sex drive or irregular menstrual cycles for females also. A lot of joint and muscle aches and pains, because like I mentioned earlier, cortisol is your natural anti-inflammatory. That's why if you guys have ever had a cortisone shot or know of somebody who has, or you hear about like, athletes all the time getting these, that is a man-made version of cortisol because it's a natural anti-inflammatory. So we can have more aches and pains if our cortisol is dysregulated or low. It can be really hard to fall asleep or wake up. So if your cortisol rhythm is off, and I guess I should explain a little bit, your cortisol is supposed to be highest in the morning time when you wake, and then it's supposed to slowly taper off through the rest of the day to be at its lowest at nighttime to allow you to go to sleep. So if you're having a hard time falling asleep, that could mean that your cortisol rhythm is out of whack and your cortisol is maybe spiked or relatively high at nighttime. So it's hard for your body to shut down. And inversely, if your cortisol is too low in the morning time because that rhythm is out of whack, then it's going to be harder for you to get up out of bed. You're going to be like dragging yourself out of bed. Cravings for salts are hugely correlated with this because magnesium is one of the things that nourishes our adrenal glands and cortisol levels. So we'll start to notice that we crave more salt because we're depleted in that way. And thyroid imbalances. In most cases, a thyroid imbalance is usually a secondary condition to adrenal dysfunction, and we're going to talk about the connection here in just a little bit. But also, what happens here, and unless you have an actual autoimmune issue where you have a genetic disposition to a thyroid issue, the adrenals will disrupt the thyroid hormone and its balance also. And then the inability to handle stress, because our cortisol hormone is our stress hormone. And basically, as it's released more, we have that dysfunction or dysregulation in it. So we feel kind of antsy or anxious all the time. Again, this is kind of the cortisol junkie where we're running on a high. Like if you guys ever notice or have experienced, or maybe you currently are, like you just feel like you're kind of like jittery, anxious all the time. You're ready to move to the next project. Everything's going great, but then like the littlest thing will stress you out. That's an inability to handle stress, usually as a result of cortisol being out of balance. There's a lot of other things that can be associated with adrenal dysfunction or fatigue, but these are just the most common symptoms that we typically see.
Yeah, and just to add in, like it's easy for us to go down this list, but if you are one of the people who are experiencing these, like we totally understand it's no joke, and we're going to talk more about how to diagnose it and things that you can do. But I remember when I started working with Jen, because I had had 2 PCPs in a row that told me I was in perfect health, and I was like, I'm not in perfect health. I get out of bed and I have no energy, and I literally lie on the floor next to my bed because that's at least improvement from being in bed. And you kind of get in this position of feeling like you're crazy because your doctor's telling you you're fine. And when Jen did one of the tests that she's going to talk about on me and said, you have the energy starting out the day of like 1/10 of what the average person has. Like I literally burst into tears because hearing that there was like validation to what I was feeling was such an emotional relief for me, because this stuff really it takes a while to um, culminate, I think, for some of us. And so finally having titles and names and labels to this really helped me. So if you are experiencing any of these, that we do understand how life sucking this stuff can feel. So we're going to get into what you can do about it. But um, okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the most common thing is that when clients come to work with me is that they're experiencing a lot of symptoms and either them or the doctors can't really put their finger on it, or they're stuck in what I call the cycle of trial and error. So like your PCP might be recommending, oh, here, try this medication, or take this over the counter thing, or do this. And like it might work as a band-aid for the meantime, but the long term, nothing's really getting any better. And that's where usually adrenal dysfunction is an underlying factor. So and that, especially with people who feel fatigued all the time, like if you guys find that you're relying on coffee all the time to make it through the day, or having afternoon slumps, or like Molly was saying, like just dragging yourself, feeling like you couldn't get out of bed, like you just had no energy to start with. Because remember, I was explaining the cortisol rhythm in the beginning, that it should be highest in the morning time and slowly taper off through the day. And that's very common. What Molly experienced was, I see that with a lot of people, like they're kind of just tanked because there is such a demand for cortisol all the time. Their body's having a hard time keeping up with the production of it. So let's talk about the diagnosis process. Before, like I said, it's not really something that's recognized in the medical community as a diagnosis per se. A naturopath or a functional medicine type of MD is going to be more likely to discuss this with you, or have you go through some testing. They wouldn't necessarily maybe diagnose you with it, but they would understand that it's an underlying imbalance. And there are a couple of different tests that you can do. So I've listed these in order from kind of best to okay, and I'll talk about the benefits of each one of them. So the number one best test that you can do right now on the market is something called a dry urine test. And there's a company out there called Dutch that primarily does this test. And the benefit about this is that the Dutch is really easy. It's something you get to do at home, first of all, so you don't have to go get your blood drawn or going to see the doctor or anything. You simply, just like taking a pregnancy test or something, you basically like pee on a piece of paper or in a cup and dip your stick in there. And this Dutch test, it shows us total and free cortisol. So you have total cortisol, you have free cortisol. It actually shows us cortisone versus cortisol as well. So we can look at and it shows you the metabolites. So we can actually see, okay, how well is your body actually producing cortisol, like making it, like think of it like a factory and how much it's factoring, and then how well is your body utilizing it, like how is it being metabolized. And this can actually, we can pinpoint things related to a thyroid disorder on this new test also. So if you have really good like free cortisol, but your metabolites are really low, that's actually an indication of a sluggish thyroid. And we wouldn't, we could just see that without running a thyroid test, or we could pick that up and then do a thyroid test as a result of that, which is kind of cool. And it shows the cortisol rhythm. So with the urine test, you do 4 samples throughout the day. So you do first thing in the morning, then you do one at noon, and then one in the afternoon, and then one at evening. So like I was talking about earlier, we can look at that cortisol rhythm and see, are there certain dysfunctions? Like I'll have some clients where they start out really strong in the morning time, but then they're totally tanked in the afternoon time. So that's just a sign of dysregulation. We want to start to balance that out for them. On the Dutch test, we can also see different sex hormones, so estrogens, progesterones, testosterones, DHEA, and melatonin. So these can be really helpful in understanding how all the hormones are working together. For example, I just had a lady who is postmenopausal, but she's still fatigued. Her cortisol actually looks amazing, but instead of boosting some of her progesterone and estrogen, we're just going to support the adrenals, even though her cortisol looks great, because if we support the adrenals, that's going to automatically boost estrogen and progesterone. So then she doesn't have to take any bioidentical hormones to feel better, essentially. So this really is, if you guys follow Chris Kresser or any of the other functional medicine people out there, this is the top of the line like test that everybody is kind of taking a look at and starting to use. The second one that I have listed here, which is I would consider a good test, is a saliva-based test. You can do this through BioHealth, or there's a couple other labs that do this one. This is one of the ones that Molly had done. I've done this a couple times as well. And it is similar to the Dutch test in that it's going to show us a cortisol rhythm. So you do a 4-point saliva sample, again, first thing in the morning, afternoon, mid-afternoon, and then evening, so we can see that rhythm. It also picks up on some of the sex hormones and melatonin, so it can give us those additional insights. What it doesn't show us is the differentiating between like how much your body's actually producing and how well you're metabolizing it. So a little less insights, but still really valuable pieces of information to show the dysfunction. What I really like about this one is you can actually see the relative spikes throughout the day. So if somebody has a relative cortisol spike, let's say at noon, that would be an indication that they possibly have a food sensitivity, that they ate something that created stress, and then now their cortisol is spiked as a result of that. Also, if they have a relative spike in the evening time before bed, that can be an indication of like a parasite or a bacteria or a yeast overgrowth, because those things are nocturnal and they cause stress internally. So when we're going to sleep, they get active and they spike our cortisol. So again, really great insights, like kind of different approaches to two of these tests, but tons of information that you can use to rebalance your body. The last one on here is an okay test, and this would be something that typically your PCP would run if you were to ask for an adrenal test. It would be a blood or a serum test. And this really isn't that helpful overall because it only shows total cortisol. So total cortisol output for the day can be a little bit deceiving. It doesn't tell us anything about the rhythm. So how does your rhythm look? Like, how does your cortisol start out in the morning and how is it tapering off through the evening time? And also, it's a delayed kind of measurement as well, because the time that it takes your body to output cortisol and then to metabolize it and for it to get into the bloodstream can be really delayed. So it's not like an accurate reading for what your cortisol looks like at this time. It could be something that's been floating around in there for a while. So ultimately, if you guys are interested in testing, you definitely want to go for either the urine test or the saliva test to get the best insights about what is going on with your cortisol exactly. So let's talk about now just how do the adrenals affect the gut and the thyroid, as Molly mentioned a little bit earlier. And when I work with clients, I tend to like to look at both of these things in conjunction because it can work kind of both ways. It's that age-old question, like what came first, the chicken or the egg, that we can never answer. Was it adrenal dysfunction that came first that caused dysfunction in the gut and the thyroid? Or was it maybe gut or thyroid dysfunction that came first that then created stress that overwhelmed the adrenals essentially? But ultimately, all of these things are interconnected. So I mentioned the HPA axis earlier, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. You can see on the nice graph that we have here, like the hypothalamus and pituitary gland are up there in your kind of like brain center, and then your adrenal glands again are on top of your kidneys. And this is the main control center. Like your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals kind of like regulate almost everything else. They're part of the endocrine system, and they are in charge of so many functions of our body. So when we have adrenal dysregulation, that dysfunction suppresses the thyroid production because the hypothalamus and pituitary are so interlocked with the adrenals. So when the adrenals are out of balance, then it's sending mixed signals, to the hypothalamus and pituitary gland that are then sending mixed signals over to the thyroid. So it can specifically like suppress that function of T3 to T4 conversion. If you guys listened to our webinar that we did a couple weeks ago on thyroid, you know how important it is to look at T3 and T4 when you're considering your thyroid health overall. Like I mentioned, also cortisol is a natural anti-inflammatory. So if cortisol is bouncing all over the place, if we're depleting it, if it's having a hard time keeping up with the demand, then it's going to go to the most important things and maybe not pay attention so much to inflammation. So that inflammation can then occur in our thyroid. It can also occur in our gut. The inflammation starts to wear down our gut. One of the things that stress also does, and remember, stress is the trigger for cortisol, is if you do have any parasites or bacteria or yeast in your gut, those critters create something called biofilm, which is like a slimy, like waste product substance. So whenever there's any kind of stress, which is initiating cortisol, it also is initiating them to create more biofilm, which is toxic waste internally, which then in turns creates more stress and inflammation in our gut, which then turns around and causes a release of cortisol. So it's kind of this vicious cycle that happens. And that stress overload just reduces the function of the gut, and then it makes us even more susceptible to what I call gut bugs or gut invaders. So these gut bugs or invaders can basically inhabit our insides because our immune system is suppressed and because our gut is damaged. There's maybe some degree of leaky gut that's going on. So again, it's that question of what came first, the chicken or the egg, the adrenals or the gut dysfunction. We don't really know, but we know that if we restore balance to all of these areas of the body, then overall healing happens and the person starts to feel drastically improved and better. I mean, within, I would say, a matter of 5 to 7 days when I work with somebody on restoring balance to their adrenals and their gut simultaneously, their energy is instantly up. They feel so much better. Their digestive issues start to go away, and they feel more in control and able to handle stress overall.
And the only thing I would add to this is, and this is my personal experience with it, because I was one of those, like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, the thyroid or the adrenals. I had my thyroid issue first. I was diagnosed with that first, but something important that I didn't know, and if you want to learn more about this, you can watch our webinar from last week about hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, is that the majority of people who have hypothyroidism have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune. So I was told to not focus on my thyroid, to focus on my adrenals, because by healing the adrenals, the thyroid would naturally heal. And that was 100% wrong. And it delayed my healing journey because what wasn't known at that point was that I had Hashimoto's. So if you do have both, make sure you get that full picture analysis. Do you also have the antibodies that indicate Hashimoto's, or is it just true hypothyroidism? Because
Mm-hmm.
the difference between those two things will lead to totally different paths of healing for you. If it's autoimmune, there's a lot of different things you're going to do, even more restrictions with your diet and stuff. So just make sure you know all the facts of both of these things as you talk to the people that you're working with.
100%. And that's why I think that Dutch test too, Molly, is like one of the best ones to do now because we can, if the person's like not running a thyroid at that time for some reason, you might be able to pick up on some of those thyroid indicators from that one.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Um, so I'm going to share a little bit about how I received all of this information, because this whole journey was kind of shocking for me, because I was always like successful go-getter, and I was always healthy, and I was an athlete, and I worked out, and I loved it. I was like a workout nerd. So for me to experience all this was like really shocking. And so I really had to take a deep dive into it to go like, okay, how did this happen? Because of my background, I'm such a believer that, whatever happens in our body, there's mind components to it. There's emotional components to it. So as I started my healing process and my brain fog went away, I started really like looking at this whole situation through the lens that I knew, which are, my tools as a life coach, as a yoga and meditation teacher, and experience as an energy healer. Because like I said, whatever is going on in our body is just a larger symptom of like what's going on in our life. So there is that connection between our mind, body, and energy that's so strong. And when you begin connecting those three dots, you truly begin to understand where the source of your illness is. And from that space, you can really begin to heal, because yes, you need people like Jen, health coach, and doctors and supplements, like 100% critical to this, to healing in this type of situation. And I had some amazing ones. I work with some amazing people eventually, including Jen. But some of the most powerful shifts in my health and happiness came from understanding how my mindset, so my pattern of thinking and my behavioral patterns had contributed to this health situation I was in. And you'll see on the screen here, although it's not an exact side-by-side comparison, it'll kind of give you a visual of what I'm going to talk about for the next 10 or 15 minutes here. So if you look on the left, there's the body and you see where all the glands are. And then over on the right, there's this figure of a woman with these different circles in front of her. And basically, for each physical area of our body, there is this corresponding chakra or energy center. And it looks like a little sparkling ball of light. We can't see this. The majority of people can't see it. Intuitive types can see these, but most people can't see these, but they're there. And they represent how our energy is functioning in these areas of our body. So you can kind of see how they line up. So our throat chakra, for example, is connected to our thyroid gland, and it's the color turquoise. So you can see on the black figure there, there's the turquoise color right near the throat, which is connected to the thyroid gland. And then we go to like the heart area, which is the thymus, is the color green. There's the energy center right there. And then the adrenal glands are located in the solar plexus, which we're talking about, which is the yellow, so our upper stomach area. So I'm going to be talking about this a little bit. And so I wanted to just kind of give you a visual of what that looked like. So our solar plexus chakra, the one connected with adrenals, what is this energy center all about? So physically, it's connected to the liver, gallbladder, spleen, stomach, small intestine, adrenals, the mid-spine area, the pancreas. And you'll see I highlighted in pink here anything that is connected to this whole adrenal conversation that we're having. Our solar plexus is our center of personal power. So when it's imbalanced, we're confident and we know our abilities and we take action and we move forward with our dreams. When we know our self-worth and we own that, we own our worthiness. But when there's an imbalance in this energy center, we might feel timid or we might feel like we're not worthy, and it's also our center of ego. So like on one side, the ego is very like, that machismo man you think of who's like super egotistical. And then on the other side, there's the opposite side of that is actually someone who is lacking in self-worth and not believing in themselves. So this whole physical energy connection can influence each other too. The goals of this area of our body. So what's going on in this area? What does it provide? It's confidence, accomplishment, power, transformation, metabolism, and our ability to visualize success. And it's, it was interesting to me. I knew about chakras, but as I learned about these types of diseases, like a lot of us, I'm going to talk about this, tie our worth to our accomplishments. And so when you get in that cycle, we burn this area of our body. And then when we're imbalanced on the physical side, we can have digestive issues, eating disorders, chronic fatigue, and a lot more. I condensed this for our purposes today. We can also have emotional imbalances. So feeling like, doubtful or angry. We can feel indecisive. We can lack motivation or willpower. We might have this need to control things like, oh my gosh, we're afraid that our husband's not going to change the baby the right way. Or, just we let all these things bubble up that we feel like we need to control in our lives, dishonoring ourselves, and also fear can be something in the center. And so don't worry, this might sound out there. I'm going to tie in how this all connects and how I use this information to really heal myself. So I'm going to share with you 6 ways that I was majorly burning my adrenals, and I want to see which of them resonate for you. So as I reflected, I kind of coached myself through this process using, my skill set. The behaviors that really impacted my adrenals and clients that I see too is self-worth. So like I said, tying our worth to our actions. And this solar plexus area is like, pardon my French, but it's kind of like it's the chakra that helps us get shit done, And so for me, I was tying my worth to my work. When I was accomplishing, I was on top of the world. And when I wasn't accomplishing, I didn't feel worthy. But what was that doing to my body? I was like destroying my body to accomplish things. So I wasn't connected with my body. I didn't see how my like workaholic tendencies were impacting my body. And as I began to heal, I began to rebuild that. But the second one is indecision. So if you think about it, We waste so much energy when we're indecisive about things, going back and forth on what should I do, that dirty should word. What is the right thing to do? Kind of that black or white thinking. So when we get indecisive, we're also burning through that energy. And I've talked in some of my blogs recently I'm certified in emotional intelligence, and I remember learning then that it's like our body doesn't know the difference between a grizzly bear in our face or some person we don't care for across the table who just insulted us. So either way, our body's having this physical reaction where stress hormones um, are released. Oh, we have a question going on here. Okay, Jen just said the audio just cut out for her. Can anyone else hear me? Can you just type in if you can hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, Molly. It did, you kind of like cut for just a quick second, but it seemed to come right back for me.
Okay, everyone said they can hear me. Okay, just want to make sure you can hear me. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. So when we're being indecisive, like our body doesn't know if there's a grizzly bear in front of us or like if we're just fretting over should we order, chocolate ice cream with vanilla. So the next thing is our need to control, which I just mentioned a moment ago, but like worrying that if we don't do something that, maybe it's not going to get done. So we take on so much stuff because we have this need to control. And a lot of like type A's have this, dishonoring ourselves. So this is a huge one because we can do this in a couple of ways. And one way is doing everything for everyone else. So bending over backwards at our own expense. So whether it's the expense of our happiness or our health. Okay, more messages. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Okay, so we can bend over backwards doing stuff for everything else and not understanding the impact that's having on our body. The other thing is not respecting our body's needs, our energy levels, overwhelming yourself with stuff nonstop, which totally loops back to number one, self-worth. So where I, on the emotional side, work with some clients and have seen this come up as like exercise, which is an amazing thing. We all know how wonderful exercise is, right? But when our energy is tired or we've had a really long week and our body is exhausted, it's not always a great thing to go for a really intense workout. But for some of us, we're used to working out intensely, right? So our mind is kind of programmed to believe that's the best thing to do for us. And the best thing is really to check in with the body and say like, okay, is a walk the best thing right now? Or do I do that CrossFit thing or whatever else it is that's more intense for you? So dishonoring self, not being connected with what's going in your body and what it needs, and then doing a lot of things for everyone else. And you might be thinking of some other examples. These are ones that I've seen, but this is by no means a comprehensive list.
Yeah, I think these are like totally hitting home with most people that I work with too, Molly. I mean, all of these things on the list, I see them to some varying degree. I think the number, like the top things always are the need to control, the self-worth, and dishonoring self, and a little bit of fear too. I mean, those are things that I personally experienced. Like I was very similar to you, where accomplishing made me feel like successful and worthy. I mean, I climbed the corporate ladder and burnt myself out, and the need to control absolutely everything. As an adult child of an alcoholic, if there's anybody on the line that can relate to that, like we have this need to control everything. So I've been practicing letting go of control, and this what Molly's talking about right here has been probably most recently the biggest part of my healing journey. Like I worked on so much of the physical aspect before, and this past year has been really hugely focused, thanks to Molly, on working on the energetic and like mental side of things, and it has completely like progressed my healing in this process. So it is a huge way of how we treat ourselves. And one of the things that I'll just kind of add here too is, I ask people like, what does the A in type A personality stand for? And I think it stands for adrenal fatigue because those are and I'm a type A person, and most of my clients are too. It's just that constant drive to like be successful, do more, be super productive. Like we're tuning out our bodies, and like we just get so disconnected in that kind of way. And that's what Molly and I both help people like that do, is like reconnect with yourself and have that relationship with your body, because you're just literally running it into the ground. And I think your exercise example was such a clear depiction of that. I see that with people all the time, is if our body's exhausted, it's not appropriate for us to exercise until we get into a more rested place for sure.
Yeah, it's so true. And that was one of the biggest hurdles I had to overcome in my mind because I felt lazy not doing intense workouts. But it was really, it was took you and my doctor being like, you're damaging your body right now. Stop. I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Uh, because it was tied into the worth piece. I have to look a certain way to be worthy, you know. So anyway, it all loops. These things all loop together. And then digestive issues. And when you see that, you're thinking, okay, why is this physical thing on here? I'm not talking about physical digestion, although that's a representation of digestion. This is a huge one. So of course it's, you know, can mean physical digestion, but it can also mean how we digest life. And that is like the critical thing of where we get into fight or flight issues. So how we digest life is how we choose to respond to our experiences. So is everything in your life drama, chaos, and stress? Like when something happens to you that upsets you, what do you do there? Like, do you call 10 people? Because when you call 10 people to repeat the story 10 times, you're creating the stress over and over and over again, right? As opposed to calling one good friend, processing it, and then making a choice how to respond to it instead of reacting on that drama wheel. Um, you know, and on the flip side is like, are you mindful enough to consciously choose how you're responding to life stuff pretty regularly? Like we all, you know, have our bad days and need a little more venting. But typically, how we respond to the circumstances of our life affect us physically. Is our body going to go into that fight or flight mode, or are we able to stop it in its process through how we respond mentally and emotionally? And I'm not suggesting by any means to not feel your feelings, but there's a big difference. When we actually feel our feelings, they process pretty quickly. It's the stories and the chaos that we create around the feelings that block us from actually just going into feel. And when we feel, we heal. That's like, you know, the thing I always talk about. So just notice these things as you go back to your life, because I have to tell you, I cried for days when I realized what a jerk I had been to myself. I was doing all of this and more. And so it was like I had such compassion all of a sudden for my body. I went from being so angry that my body was, quote, doing this to me, to realizing there was a lot of stuff that I did to contribute to this situation. And I needed to rebuild a relationship with my body, to apologize to it, because I had been so oblivious. It was a one-way relationship. I was taking from it and it was given to me. The next thing is fear. So the solar plexus is related to being able to visualize success. Some of us, we race in our heads and we let fear get the best of us. We can't help but imagine those worst case scenarios. So you might be sitting on the couch, right? And if an alien were to look down, they'd be like, oh, that girl's having a great day. She's just sitting on the couch relaxing. No, not at all. Because inside your head, World War III is going on. Because you're coming up with every possible thing that could go wrong with the situation that you're thinking about. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide, but I'm sure people can relate. Can anyone relate out there to having that experience where there's nothing actually super crazy going on in your day, but you're creating all that stress in your head?
I
So,
used to feel that way all the time,
yeah.
literally all the time.
Yeah. And so when we can get ourselves out of those cycles, there's plenty of tools to be able to do that. It's a whole new world, in a much more peaceful world. And I'm going to share with you just like some silly examples. I blogged about this recently, but I call it like mental stress, spinning stress, and I call behavioral stress like some subtle stress. Of course, there's huge stress, which can lead to adrenal fatigue, and Jen talks about that, like divorce, death, and other things. You know, those are huge things that drain our adrenals. But then I came to realize a lot of this daily little stuff that I didn't even know I was, quote, stressing myself out over, because it was just such a part of who I was. So I'll give you an example. Like I was burning my adrenals before I even walked out my door, okay, in the morning. I would fight with my closet to find an outfit. So remember, my body doesn't know the difference between a grizzly bear or a messy closet. So stress hormones released. I would struggle with my makeup drawer to find the makeup that I wanted to wear that day. Stress hormone released. I would worry if I was going to be late because my dog is taking too long doing his business. Stress hormone released because I would sit there just spinning about it. I would think about a meeting that I'm dreading at work. Another stress hormone was released. I would pound my smoothie in the morning as I did 10 other things, which was creating digestive stress for me. And then I would get in the car and remember I need gas and now I'm going to be late for work or whatever. another stress hormone released. So those are such subtle little examples of things I was doing to myself. And I could add like 10 more, but I don't want to sound like a total maniac, right? Of before I'm even walking out the door, I've stressed my body out. And by the way, I was a super healthy person on paper. I also meditated in the morning and I worked out and I did these other things, but I was unconscious about how much stress I was creating by these little things. So while on the surface, none of those really stressed me out, my body was absorbing that stress. They were surely contributing, slowly but surely contributing to what eventually became adrenal fatigue for me. So I was having many like mini flight or fight responses in so many areas of my life that I didn't realize it. And that's just all unnecessary stress and struggle I was putting myself through. And then the other thing related to that is, at least with the clients I've worked with and myself, that there's a big tie here to perfectionism a lot of times with people. And perfectionists, in my experience anyway, tend to have some of these health issues because we're unnecessarily hard on ourselves. We're beating ourselves up over the smallest things because we're not perfect. And so that's another one that can stress us out. We can have a lot of mental stress racing about, did I do this good enough? Did I say the right thing when I was like doing whatever? So when I got serious about healing my adrenals and my Hashimoto's, which Hashimoto's is just another energetic pattern of battle, to be honest, I got serious about de-stressing as much as I could in my life. So removing all of these mini struggles that I had created and understanding the behavioral patterns behind them, because I'm just sharing some silly examples from my morning. But if you think of that and extend it out through my day and then my week and my month and my year, oh my God, there was a lot going on. So I did small things like I cleaned out my closet. I gave away a ton of stuff and I left white space in my closet so I could totally like get in and get what I needed. Completely new concept for me. Makes me smile every day. Like such a peaceful experience. My closet's not overwhelming. I can clearly see and access anything I want. A client was in my office a couple weeks ago. I opened the door to get a book for her to my closet. And she was like, you have the cleanest closets I've ever seen. And I was like, oh my God, like that is the best compliment I've ever received because this means I'm taking care of myself. I cleaned up my makeup drawer and I separated out by like everyday use and specialty use. I'm a total makeup addict. That's why I keep, mentioning that. But so no more struggle there. And but it's those little things too. Like that's a funny example, but you're doing that in your own way on some level. So you need to figure out what your makeup drawer is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I drink my smoothie when I'm sitting down without my iPhone out while I'm getting some fresh air. And I mean, I've even been like cooking lunch for myself, which is insane even to me. I don't enjoy it, but I'm doing it for my health. I got in the habit of, I fill my gas tank now all the time, like before it's empty, because I don't want to have to be in that situation where I'm, stressed out because I'm type A and perfectionist. I have those underlying tendencies. So I don't like being late for stuff when I can help it. I spend 5 minutes at the end of every day tidying up whatever mess has been made so that when I wake up in the morning and I go into my office, the energy is good there. I'm not greeted with like reminders of how out of balance things are. So those are just like a few of the silly ways that I stopped taxing my body unnecessarily. Because like I said, you can be taking the best supplements, and Jen gives she has great supplements, and Jen's amazing. And I was working with her, and I had an amazing naturopath, right? But if I didn't address these core underlying behaviors that contributed to some of this in the first place, I would either have slowed down my healing process significantly, or I would have been stuck in a cycle of sickness because I would have been recreating the situation over and over again in different areas of my life. So maybe the supplements would have worked and the coaching by Jen and the guidance by my doctor, but it's like inevitably if I didn't get to that core inside of me of how those behaviors are affecting this, there would have been bigger problems.
Yeah, and that's huge, Molly, because what I think that really exemplifies is that you took ownership for your actions. And that's the biggest part of all of this change is taking ownership, realizing that most of this like undue stress we're doing to ourselves. It may feel like it's a demand or an expectation coming from others, but in the reality, it's really coming from ourselves. Like one of the things I'll tell my clients all the time is you don't work in an emergency room. Like nobody's going to die if you don't respond to that. If you
Right.
don't respond to the email, like nobody's going to die if you don't get the project done. And also looking at what resources of support do you need then? I think that like one of the big things for me was hiring my housekeeper to come on a weekly basis
Yeah.
instead of a monthly basis. And that was like a big, huge thing for me was not beating myself up about spending money weekly when I'm like fully capable of cleaning my house and you know, do we have the money to spend on that, when it was stressing me out every single weekend to spend like 2 or 3 hours just doing like the basic cleaning, and then I would not have time, as much time to relax after a long like work week or whatever. So it's little things like that where how much is your health worth for you to make some time to do this stuff, to clear your clutter and create more peace in your life, essentially.
Yeah, and you know what? If because this would have been me like 2 years ago, I would have been like, these women are crazy, blah 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 blah. Like, because that's how I sabotaged. You know what I mean? Like, I was a super sabotager, even though I thought I was totally like on it. And these little things, when you can identify, and you might need help, you might need to work with someone to help you identify what those are. You might be coming up with them already. But when you understand what those behaviors are, you then have choices to make. And
Mhm.
that's when it starts to become easier. And it does require discipline, but as your health starts improving, like there's no better feeling in the world. So you'll do what you have to when you have the right tools and you have the right support. So just to wrap up here, it's like, instead of mind racing, worry, fear, and perfectionism, it's just awareness, presence, and visualizing what you do want. I do a lot of like manifesting meetings with people. People are like, what, you work on like Hashimoto's and manifesting? And I'm like, yeah, because a critical part of it is holding space mentally for what it is we want to create in our lives. And getting that other part out of like, worrying about what can go wrong, it does nothing for us except burn us out. Having awareness. So when our ego pops up and says, like, you're not perfect, you were horrible today, having the ability to go, you know what, I wasn't perfect today. You're totally right. And I don't need to listen to you right now. So goodbye. The behavioral stress. So like getting rid of that subtle stress stuff. Having priorities that are connected to what you want to create in your life. If you're on the TV or on your iPhone all day, like those are activities that are not contributing to your happiness. You might do them occasionally. We all do. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying that. But it's like when we get sucked in, when we're not mindful of what we really want in life, we get sucked into activities and another year goes by and we haven't done that thing that we wanted to do. And then sometimes, actively sabotaging. So instead, it's like having a simplified space was what worked for me, a plan of action and some discipline and accountability. So what I'm going to do is as we begin to wrap up, I'm just going to ask if there's any questions out there about anything that we talked about. Please just type it into the box and we will start answering those as we begin wrapping up. But basically, the summary of everything I said to you is just like when we truly begin to relate to the circumstances of our lives differently, we begin to build a healthy and balanced relationship with our body, a give and a take with our body. And that's when we begin a true and lasting healing process. When I started building out this program, Happy to Heal, that I'll talk to you a little bit about, I talked to Jen about it and I said, I'm calling it Happy to Heal because at the beginning, I was like such a victim to my whole circumstance. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to be healed. I'll be so happy when I'm healed and I'm all better. And then I realized, there were things inside of me that I knew weren't right, like patterns that I wanted to break. But what this journey of healing Hashimoto's and adrenal and leaky gut gave me was the opportunity to heal that stuff on a deep level, which then healed my health. So there's different ways you can look at this journey. And if you're able to take an approach like that, then you'll come out on the other end happier and healthier than ever before. Um, oh, mind and adrenals. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Sorry, I forgot this. And we have diet stuff too. Okay. Sorry. So I'll just run through this quickly. But mind, producing thoughts constantly creates the physical response, which creates the emotional response. So instead, respond to the thoughts differently. Take a few deep breaths, stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, and creates a different emotional state. So you can follow me on any of my stuff. Jen, too, we talk about this a lot. So we'll give you some tools. And I did, Jen, I accidentally took out the diet slide. So I'll have you just go through that too, because diet is another key to healing your adrenals.
Yeah, diet is huge when it comes to healing your adrenals. And one of the number one things to healing your adrenals is to control your blood sugar levels. Because every time your blood sugar levels bounce or are increased or raised, your body puts out cortisol to bring them back down. So that's one of the demands that's placed on cortisol. So that means like avoiding sugar and inflammatory foods specifically. So processed foods, added sugar, even like, we've been chatting with some people about how much fruit should you have in your diet. And one of the things that I'll work with people on is creating a balance of proteins, fats, and carbs in every single meal, because even if you have just an apple by itself without any fat or protein to balance out the release of sugar into the blood, that can create a relative spike in your blood sugar that can then create a release of cortisol in the system. So we want to be balancing or controlling blood sugar levels by just monitoring the foods that we're putting in our body and eating like, ratio of protein, carbs, and fats in every single meal. Adequate protein is really essential, and the biggest piece of getting enough protein is definitely the B vitamins that you get through proteins, which are particularly, you're going to find your highest B vitamin content in red meat, which a lot of people freak out when I mention eating more red meat, because
I
it's
did.
not something that yeah, Molly totally freaked out. It's not something that people are used to doing, because there's so much like just bad media out there about red meat. But eating organic grass-fed red meat, you can eat as much as you want. I eat it almost every day, and I have bacon every day also, so that I can get good amounts of B vitamins. And then eating the 6 to 9 cups of veggies that you probably have heard Molly talk about before. You can have a little bit of fruit in there also, but you primarily want to focus on the veggies, because veggies are going to be way higher in minerals like magnesium and selenium and things like that that your body needs to heal adrenals. Plus, they're going to be lower in sugars to help balance your blood sugar also, and then you can incorporate some fruits. And usually fruits are probably a little bit better to do earlier in the day. And anything that's rich in magnesium, so sea salt is something that you can be adding as you're cooking or sprinkling on your food. That's going to be really high in magnesium. So any magnesium-rich foods and supplements. And then one of the things that I'll have most people do is, especially if you have a hard time either falling asleep, or if you find yourself waking up particularly between like 2 and 3 a.m., is having a protein snack before bed, which probably goes against every rule you've ever heard about not eating before bed, but it usually does the trick. And part of that is to help balance your blood sugar overnight. So particularly if you're what I call like a protein type, where you need more protein in your diet on a regular basis, this protein snack before bed, and it doesn't have to be huge, and it doesn't mean you have to eat like a chicken leg or chicken wing before bed either. It's kind of gross. You can make you
I've
can
never
make
done
some.
that, for the record.
Yeah, I literally have some clients that do that. So you can make like some tasty dessert type treats. Like I have some recipes. If you guys want them, we could probably send them out. But recipes for like protein truffles or protein cookies that I make out of protein powder, using a dairy-free protein powder. So something like rice protein or hemp protein or pea protein, or my new favorite, bone broth protein. And you can have something like that, like just a little nugget of something before bed. Peanut butter is also really great, like a spoonful of peanut butter or something. And I'll usually do my protein snack. People always ask me this, like right before bed or an hour before bed. So I'll usually have dinner maybe somewhere between like 7 and 7:30, and then I'll have my snack before bed somewhere between 9 and 9:30, and I go to bed at 10. So somewhere within that hour before. Because if you think about it, you're kind of like doing a fast at nighttime. And if your adrenals are shot, fasting is not great for you. So if you guys, anyone on the line, intermittent fasting and you're tired, probably not such a good idea. Um, Definite don'ts when it comes to diet is processed non-organic foods, because that all increases inflammation. So again, your cortisol is your natural anti-inflammatory. So if we're eating foods that are causing inflammation, then our body, that's placing a demand for cortisol output to come in and kind of put out the fire or the inflammation. So we want to reduce the occurrence of that. cutting calories. So that kind of goes along with the intermittent fasting, like starving the adrenals of nutrients. Not a good idea. Like, definitely don't want to do that. And we also talked about how that's related to thyroid a couple weeks ago. Like, when you're cutting your calories, that can reduce your, it can make your thyroid sluggish as well. So those things are interacting, and how are they playing out together? And then consuming like alcohol or caffeine daily. I know this is maybe a tough one for you guys to think about on the line, especially if you are used to having your daily coffee, and especially if you're having it multiple times a day. The reason that I say this is because whenever you have coffee or any kind of a caffeine or alcohol, it spikes your cortisol levels for up to 24 hours. That's a long period of time. So if you think about, if you're having coffee in the morning and then more caffeine later in the afternoon time, you're continuously creating a demand for cortisol. And same thing with alcohol. If you're used to having like that glass of wine or two at nighttime as a way to de-stress, then it's, increasing the demand for cortisol again and creating just that overall imbalance. And, it's not easy to cut these things out cold turkey. That's not what I'm saying by any means. But, doing some of the mindset work that Molly was talking about earlier to, investigating like what is it that you feel a need for to have those things, and where do you need nourishment, and what can you do otherwise to get that same type of nourishment or release, like stress relief, that's not destructive to your health, like doing meditation, or if you start working on your diet and meditating and going to bed on time, that's going to naturally bring your energy up so that you don't need the caffeine. Or if you're going to start to eliminate some of those stressors that you're creating in your life, that helps to balance your energy too. So it's identifying again, like what are the things that you have control of that you can start making improvements on that are going to contribute to the long-term, like rebuilding of your health essentially.
Perfect. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in now, because I know we've gone over a lot of information for you. There's some more upcoming webinars. There's a couple that we've done too that you can get instant replay. And Jen and I are doing another one together on September 8th. Your gut, the secret to healing your adrenals and thyroid. Did we change that date? Well, I'll update that.
No, I think we're keeping it the 8th.
The 8th, okay.
Like, yeah.
All right. And so just to let everyone know, if you are someone who is going through the process, whether you're, whatever stage that you're at with it of either thyroid, adrenal, or gut issues, I'm launching a program in September. And it's basically everything I wish I knew as I was going through the process. It's a 12-week program and making it very affordable, because I know that a lot of people who do go through this they have to cut back at work sometimes and different things. So that can affect our money situation. And I remember, reading when I was going through this, like de-stress and meditate and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, I know a lot of this because I'm trained in all of it, but what's happening to that poor person out there that doesn't like already have experience with some of this stuff? Because when you have brain fog, like you can't learn anything new. You know what I mean? You're just trying to like get by. So I'm putting together a comprehensive program. The first month is about navigating the diagnosis process. So like when you're figuring stuff out, like understanding what's going on inside of you, taking responsibility for how you have contributed to it. A lot of different things there. For a lot of you, you may also have had my experience where it took a long time to find the right healthcare team, and that can be very frustrating. Communicating with people in your life, what is going on with you, connecting with your body in a new way, learning how to do that, learning to change your mindset so that you support your healing process that you're working through with your doctor and your health coach and that type of stuff. Establishing your temporary normals. So you guys giving up all the stuff like I am grain-free, alcohol-free, processed sugar-free, chocolate-free. I mean, you name it, I'm like pretty much free, but there's still awesome foods to eat. I don't feel deprived in any way, and I never get tempted anymore. And I'm teaching in this program how to do that because I needed to figure out on my own, because I was reading books and it's like, okay, well, if it were as easy to cut out food as just cut it out, then we wouldn't have disease or no one would be overweight. We'd all be naturally doing it, right? But that's the hard part, because there's so many rituals in our life that are connected with food and lifestyle. There's so many social events that we go to. And I'm an extrovert. I wanted to feel like I was connecting to the group, because I felt like an alien at first when I was going to happy hour and I'm having like chicken and vegetables when everyone else is having like wine and cheese, and I would want to like hurt people about it. That's not really a solution. So I taught myself different things, like a technique to go into the bathroom for 1 minute to reset my energy, and it totally works. So this is like the tools that I wish I had to help you out so you don't like rip your hair out or feel like a science experiment when you're being told, try this and wait 3 weeks and see how you're doing, or being asked, by family for the 100th time, like, what's wrong with you? And why can't you just take a prescription for it? So it's really packed with practical and powerful mindset, behavioral, and lifestyle tools that will not only help you heal, but it will come out on the other end happier and grateful for the
Mm-hmm.
journey. I swear I'm grateful now. I'm like happy that I went through it. Wouldn't want to go through it again, but it changed my life in the most positive ways. And it can for you too, really, once you get the right help and support.
Yeah. I just want to add here for you guys, like what Molly is putting into this 3-month program is basically what it took me 3 years to learn by trial and error and beating myself up about it, and then eventually realizing it wasn't worth it anymore. And I think if anything, if you guys are going through or experiencing any type of thyroid, adrenal issues, gut dysfunction, like one of the hugest pieces of your healing process is also going to be having the support and like community,
Yeah.
because it can be a lonely road sometimes. And I know that that's what some of my clients struggle with, and I struggled with, like Molly was saying as well. Like, how do you like come to terms with being separate but still belonging in your friend group? It's not about getting rid of all of your friends and getting new ones, like people that you've been friends with forever.
Yeah.
Like, how do you still live in that world but still take care of yourself at the same time? And it, like I said, it took me 3 years to really figure this out, and she's condensing it into 3 months for you guys. And this is the biggest part. Like, I will work with my clients for, a year or longer sometimes, or shorter sometimes, and we do all of that physical work. And I touch on some of these things, but I'm constantly referring my clients back over to Molly to do this deeper work, because this is where the true, like, the switch happens, so that you never wind up back in that place again. You have to change the mindset piece and how you perceive it and your relationship with it 100%.
Well, thanks, Jen. Yeah, we do. You need both sides. Like I said, you need the medical side, you need the right supplements and nutritional coaching and everything that Jen provides, but you need this too. And I think this is going unnoticed in a lot of the resources that I utilized in my healing. So became very passionate about sharing what I did to help myself with others. So, with that being said, if there's no questions or anything, here's our contact information. And Jen has an awesome offer for you too, which I'll let you talk about here.
Yeah, if you guys are interested in testing your adrenals after this call, and if it's been a question in your mind, or even if you've had them tested in the past and you're wondering about testing them again, I am doing a special discounted offer for that Dutch test that we talked about in the beginning, the urine sample that gives us so many helpful insights to look at your not only cortisol and adrenal function, but also looking at those other hormones for you, melatonin and everything. So I'll be sending out some additional information with the recording for that you guys will see. But essentially, what you get is a package with the test. So you get the Dutch test, and then you get a 90-minute session with me to go over the results and all of my recommendations based on what the test results are saying for like diet and supplements and exercise and sleep, and some of the stress stuff that you can then like work with Molly more on, or whatever it might be. And so you guys can take advantage of this. It's actually active now. So if you go to that link, holistichealthboss.com/adrenal-test, you can purchase that package. It's $459. And you'll get shipped your test right away that you do at home. And then once I have your results, we'll meet to go over everything, which usually is within a matter of a couple of weeks for you. And that'll be available for you guys until August 25th, next Thursday.
Great, thank you, Jen. And that's a key thing to know, because some doctors, depending on where you live, might not give you this, and you might want that full knowledge. I know that really was helpful for me in my healing journey. So it's a great option if you don't have someone that you can trust, that you can go to, and do it. And it's easy because it all gets mailed to you and you just mail it back. So
Perfect.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, you guys. Have a great evening, everyone.
All right. Bye.